All right, we need to talk about a pretty serious security alert that's making waves in the IT community. It's all about Ivanti's Endpoint Manager Mobile, EPMM, which is a tool that tons of organizations use to manage all their mobile devices. So what's the problem? Well, there are a couple of really nasty vulnerabilities that hackers are already using out in the wild. Let's just jump right in.
So Ivanti themselves are the ones sounding the alarm on this. They've disclosed two brand new and very critical vulnerabilities. And listen, when a major security company like Ivanti puts out a direct warning, it's time for everybody to stop what they're doing and pay attention. In this number you see here, 9.8, that's exactly why everyone's paying attention. That is the severity score out of 10 on what's called the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. To put that in perspective, anything over a 9 is considered critical. So 9.8 is basically a 5-alarm fire in the cybersecurity world. This score actually applies to both of the new flaws, which are now being tracked as CVE-2026-1281 and CVE-2026-1340.
So what does a score that high actually mean in the real world? It means an attacker needs absolutely nothing to get in. No password, no username, no special access at all. They can just connect to a vulnerable system from anywhere in the world and start running their own malicious code. It's like someone walking right through your locked front door without even needing to pick the lock. This isn't just some abstract technical issue. This has serious real-world consequences. When attackers get this kind of wide-open access, what are they really after? What's the actual risk for the companies and, the people whose data is on these systems? Attackers could basically hit the data jackpot. And we're not just talking about a few names and emails here. They could potentially get their hands on everything from phone numbers and unique device IDs, all the way to the real-time GPS location of a person's device. That is an incredible and, frankly, scary amount of sensitive personal information. But it gets worse. It goes way beyond just stealing data. An attacker could also start making changes to the devices themselves. We're talking altering security settings, redirecting web traffic, maybe even pushing malicious software onto the phones. This takes the threat from just data theft to active control over a company's entire fleet of mobile devices. Okay, so that's the problem. And yeah, it's a big one. So let's shift gears and talk about the solution. What can system administrators do right now to protect themselves? Thankfully, Ivanti has given us some immediate steps to take. So, Ivanti has released these special RPM scripts, which are basically just packaged up software files for Linux, and they act as a temporary patch. This table here shows you exactly which script you need to apply depending on your current version of EPMM. And here's the key thing. Applying these patches requires zero downtime and doesn't impact how the system works. So the message from Ivanti is really clear. Do it now. Now you have to remember, this is a temporary fix, a stopgap. The permanent fix is on its way in version 12.8.0.0. But, and this is a really important but, Ivanti has issued a critical warning. These temporary hotfixes are wiped out if you do a version upgrade. So if you upgrade your system before that permanent fix is out, you have to reapply the script or you're right back to being vulnerable. Okay, so because this vulnerability was being exploited before it was even announced, just patching isn't quite enough. You also have to play detective and check if you were already a target. So how do you actually hunt for signs that someone tried to break in? Your number one tool for this is going to be the server's access log. Think of it like a digital guestbook for the server. Every single request made to it gets written down. For this particular issue, you're going to want to look at the https-access-log file. That's where the attackers might have left their digital footprints. And here's a really clever way to spot this specific attack. A normal request to the parts of the system that are affected gets an HTTP 200 response, which just means OK. But because of how this exploit works, an attack attempt, whether it was successful or not, actually generates a 404 not found error. That is your smoking gun. If you're seeing a 404 response for these specific system endpoints, it is a very strong sign that someone has been trying to get in. But there's a huge catch here, and this warning comes straight from Ivanti's own advisory. A good attacker knows you're going to be checking the logs, so one of the first things they'll often do after getting in is change or just delete those log files to cover their tracks. That's why having your logs backed up somewhere else off the device is so important if you want to do a real investigation. So what if you do the log hunt and you find evidence that you've been compromised? What you do next is absolutely critical. And honestly, it might not be what you'd expect. Let's walk through the right way to rebuild your system. All right, now this is where the official advice might sound a little strange. Ivanti's recommendation is not to try and clean the compromised system. Why? Because a really sophisticated attacker can hide all sorts of backdoors and sneaky ways to stay in your system. A simple cleanup will almost certainly miss them, and you'll be left thinking you're safe when you're not. The only way to be 100% sure you're clean is to start over from a state you trust. That means restoring your system from a backup that you know was made before the breach happened. And if you don't have a clean backup, you have to rebuild the server completely from scratch. And you're not done yet. After that, you've got to reset every single related password and replace your public security certificate. The only safe way forward is to assume everything was compromised. Now, it's really important to zoom out for a minute. Is this just an isolated incident, or is it part of a bigger trend? When we look at the whole picture, a pretty clear pattern starts to emerge. You can really see how serious this is by looking at the U.S. government's response. CISA, which is the nation's top cybersecurity agency, has officially added this vulnerability to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. This is a huge deal. It confirms that attackers are actively using this in the wild, and it sets a hard deadline for all federal agencies to get the fixes applied. To really get the full picture, you have to look at the history. This is not a one-off thing for this product. If you look back to May of 2025, Ivanti had to patch two totally different zero-day flaws that were also being actively used in attacks. Seeing it happen again really highlights a troubling pattern, and it confirms that this particular piece of software is squarely in the crosshairs of attackers. So, to wrap this all up, we've got a critical vulnerability, we've got a clear path for patching and for detecting an attack, and we've got a stark reminder that if you are breached, you have to rebuild from scratch. But this whole incident points to a much bigger issue. Applying patches and hunting for intruders, that's all reactive. It's necessary for sure, but we're always one step behind. The real challenge this brings up is a much bigger one. How do we, as an entire industry, finally break this cycle and get ahead of these zero-day threats? That's really the critical question to think about.